Conversations with Self and Soul this morning. Self Therapy 101. Help from Spirit. Still going through my awakening. It's been intense. Dreams get weird. Be guided on the topic rather than let's talk about the fact that I do self-therapy, right? I don't have to. It's a choice. I attempted, all the conventional means, and it didn't. It it didn't work. I need to be honest, because it does. It just places I went did not. Still a lot to talk about. Been through a lot. Too much. Right? Where did things go wrong? For self personally, like my trauma started at a very young age. Um, I look back and, it was hard for me. I say it a lot when I record, like, hard to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Which I feel like when things start at such a young age is somewhat to be expected. And you realize that you made it through all those things, and because I have a light of my own. Sometimes it's difficult to see one in front of you when you're carrying one, especially a bright one. But right, like, what happened? Like, I feel we're getting better as a society, slowly but surely, taking steps in the right direction. This last, like, year and a half, maybe longer, I don't know, the last year's been intense, and I feel like I studied a lot, and people are going through these awakenings all over the world, all race, creeds, religions, and cultures. People everywhere going through this right now, and I want to be part of, one of the ones that helps people to get through this. Why is it necessary? Why are we at a point in our species history where this was so paramount that a grand awakening happens? And I spoke about in other videos, I feel like it's because of the pain. We don't speak about the pain. Going back generations, it became normal to suppress, and not because anybody was wrong, but I feel that we thought that we knew what we were doing, and now we're in this really cool place where we get to look at our entire species history and put a lot of the puzzle pieces together and be like, oh, there's another way. You know, we got sidetracked, I feel. Hi, Kitty. Hello. Alright, isn't that what life is all about? Is how do I say that? With an awakening, a lot of information comes in, so it's been a process getting to a point where I'm ready to really speak about the things that like I'm starting to see and to understand. And I keep wanting to say like it just seems like common sense to me, but then I'm like it's maybe not because I can't find anyone to talk to that could keep up with it. That's not nice to say, but you know the truth is the truth. I feel like people could if they I just what do you research, you know, how far back do you go, what do you look into, what do you teach yourself, and that's the problem is that I kind of look into a little bit of everything, and then so my conversations are a little different, and small talk doesn't really do it for me. It And I want to help guide people because I feel, especially as a society, we got lost for too long. And forgive me if I speak like too bluntly about this. Sometimes I have to catch myself. I was in solitude for a long time, and I have to catch myself because sometimes I feel like maybe I don't realize how much I actually woke up. And I'll say things like it's just normal conversation, but I'm talking to like myself right now, just recording, so I guess that's okay. Alright, where did we get lost? Everybody's on a different path, different soul journey, and it's like, what do you feel called to do in your life? Careful with that statement. There's a difference between being pulled by the soul and pulled by the mind, soul and spirit. Big choices. Elaborate on that myself eventually, which beautiful part about healing though is you start to learn how to master emotions and thoughts, and it's a very difficult process, not easy. But that's why healing is important versus like suppression and whatnot. How do you heal the mind if you're just suppressing emotions and thoughts rather than working through them? And when you study and you go back to like the old ways, it was to sit to know thyself, to heal thyself, to then love thyself. And you're like, oh, they should teach that in school. Right, and I feel that things seem like they're getting better. We lost our way for quite a bit as a society and as a culture. I feel just distracted by the material. And forgive me for saying that because self was included in that. Like I ran my business and it was nice, on the outside it looked beautiful. On the inside I was a hot mess. And then it was like I kept trying to heal the internal part and it wasn't working, so something was like, okay, course correct, and let's figure out how to heal. And it was just like sit in meditation and challenge my thoughts and silence, and I know that that's very difficult for many people to do, and difficult for me to do. I didn't have a choice anymore. I needed to heal. My soul was fragmented. And that's where like I get a little sad because we're in a place where people are starting to research those things and study up on them, and then you recognize like healing a vessel is one thing, and then the psyche or spirit, which kind of go hand in hand. So I look forward to the day that we start bringing those two things together, and then you recognize like what soul fragmentation is, and again you got to kind of research that and what it means to have a fragmented soul, which can happen over many lifetimes or just one that has lots and lots of trauma in it. And bringing those three together, like that's kind of the trifecta, right? When you bring psychology and then peer specialists that have the life experience, and then probably a shaman in there, heal the vessel, the spirit, and the soul. Set everybody free. Easiest way to put it. And again, like I recognize that most people don't look into things like this, and they're important. But I feel that that's why we're at a point in our species history too, right? Where we're waking up, and I mean, I guess you kind of have to believe in like past life stuff and whatnot. And it just once you start researching and study, some stuff, it kind of just and the soul remembers, different neural network from the rest of the body. The heart has a completely different neural network, which they call the seat of the soul. There's a reason for that. So sometimes it's hard to explain with the logical mind, but when you understand how the spirit guides or the soul. But that's the difference between like mind memory and soul memory. Certain things you may not be able to explain with your mind from this lifetime, but the soul remembers. And it's a little difficult to kind of wrap your head around sometimes, but that's because different works. Words of wisdom. Right, and the soul remembrance thing. I like to consider the fact that, I mean, I've researched lots of stuff, so when you go back and you look at like our ancient history from the very beginning of time, like Mesopotamia and whatnot, which it probably goes back a little further than that, but it's, what we can go carbon datings. I mean, it's a thing, but it's not accurate at all, because, water and all that affects that greatly. So things are older than we think they are. But if you really like study and research and you look at like the hieroglyphs on the pyramids, you can kind of put it together that they gained otherworldly beings down here, manipulated DNA. Probably why we have a gap in our evolution. Not everybody agrees with that statement, but it's like how far back do you go and actually research and study and like do your due diligence and be like, what makes sense to my soul rather than my mind and what I'm told. And then you kind of start to understand that, I mean, and this is just like speaking for self, this would have been kind of like trying to put together for myself in the last year, this whole awakening thing, is that it's kind of like they call it junk DNA, I prefer to call it like dormant DNA, because it's more accurate. And potentially that's what like divine testing is about, and as you go through the process of healing and learning like your karmic lessons, then that dormant DNA will begin to wake up, and you start realizing that you have more than just the 5 senses, however it needs to be earned, I feel. And then you recognize that hypothetically, let's just say that they came down and manipulated DNA to create the human being, and then we were kind of, I don't feel that we were left on our own, and if you like thank the heavens that they're doing like disclosure and stuff now, and we can tell that there's other things that do happen every now and then, and they probably don't just show up like like hi, because well, we're also part animal if we're being. I mean, we all know that. So we're probably like we should be careful till we know more, and then that's what it feels like. And that, that probably it freaks people out, right? Like you watch, what's that movie? Like Fire in the Sky, right? Freaky, scary, but let's just say that they came down, I don't know how many thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years ago to this planet, potentially. And then they've just been like watching the species, and they're like, oh, they still act like animals, so we're just gonna keep an eye on them until they're ready to evolve and awaken and step into their spiritual nature, because technically we need to be a little bit of them and a little bit of, earth stuff, right? I mean, that's what they say anyway. And I don't know, something tells me that if they travel like across the cosmos and just create new species on who knows how many planets, we don't know, we haven't made it back up there yet. But right, there's they got information that UFOs are a thing, extraterrestrials are a thing, more than likely world will have again. And it's like, what do you choose to step into? Still more of an animal nature, which like, been a long time. But then, truth helps. And then, like, that's where I realized too, like, I look into everything and study a lot of stuff, and that's kind of important. How do you grow as a soul unless you're willing to research and study the things that you don't yet know? Many people are told one thing, and they're just like, yep, that's the only way it is. And then you're like, but what else do you look into? And then some people will be like, oh, you can't look into that stuff. And it's like, well, how do you learn and grow as a soul if you don't take the time to look into other things? That's what it feels like to me anyway. I feel like that's kind of common sense. If not, then I gotta be careful when I say that, because I don't want to sound like an asshole. And it just, what is dormant DNA? Let's see, they came down midway, because probably our dormant DNA, and the more you step into your spiritual nature, and the more you go through the divine testing that I feel we've been going through for thousands and thousands of years, the more those will wake up, and then the more that you study other belief systems from all over, because if we started with like the cradle of civilization and then expanded out all over the planet, it would make sense that dormant DNA and stepping into your more spiritual nature help that DNA activate. And I feel like that's through this awakening, that's what people are going through, right? And if you study and research, that's your bread of life, If you're on that frequency that you're ready to study and research and learn and to grow on a soul level, then you're looking for those things. And if that's not really your thing, then, you don't. And you can't push anybody into it, because we're still all on different spiritual journeys and at different levels of awareness and whatnot. Some of us just in this life, I feel, chose to like do a deep dive into our consciousness, which takes kind of looking into all sorts of stuff. Like, I hear myself when I speak too, and it's like I think I woke up. I woke up. I'll share this information and be like, hey, what do you guys think about this? And then I'm like, yeah, but then you gotta be careful who you talk to, because not everybody's ready to have that conversation or willing to, or because it also takes knowing thyself, right? Which is the hardest thing. Hi, Birdie! That a person can do. Not everybody's ready or willing, and it might not be part of their, soul journey in this life to do so. So, you know what to say, who to say it to, and when to say it at their level of awareness and comfort. Always ask truth or comfort. It's important. A lot of people say they want truth, but then you try to tell them, and then if they don't believe you, they're like, and you're like, okay, that's alright. I just have to say comfort. Hi, Bluebird. Hello. I'm beautiful. Healing part, I feel like I should talk about it again. I spoke about it in another video, and not because anybody was wrong, I just think that we weren't at a point in our evolution maybe where we just, we hadn't put the pieces together. Like, you recognize that the universe itself is made by frequency and vibration. Why aren't we trying that for healing? And they're starting to, right? Which is good. You look into things, and this is what I did. Like, I was trying to heal, and I tried all the conventional ways, they were not working. So I had to really sit with self and be like, what actually works? And I was like, oh, probably sound and frequency and vibration, which is like light therapy and sound therapy. And like crystal bowl therapy is very, very good. They have good frequencies, but then you also have to recognize that then you're clearing your chakras, which I feel like when people get sick, that's what's happening, and they don't even realize. When you get a headache, and you get, your throat, chest, your tummy, you are literally trying to purge the system. Shamans understand this. When you do things like plant medicine and you get sick, it's because you're purging your system of negative energies and trying to align your chakras again. People don't look into stuff like that. It's very, very important. I feel like as a society, we think that stuff we're told that stuff is bad, and then we don't actually look into it. And then, even science can prove light therapy and sound bowl therapy and water therapy and scent therapy and the things that help you to balance the chakras and meditation and all that good stuff. It's very important. Help clear out your chakras, balance the system, heal the vessels. It'll take a little time, thousands of years that we were misguided and, polluting our systems with things. And now we're at this really cool point where it's like, oh, there's another way. why is the healing so important anyway? And it's like a lot of us going back, just even like a few generations, right? Like grandparents brought in, the W word, and then our parents, which was like that whole like season of love stuff, and then they took that stuff off the market for whatever because it expanded the consciousness, which I feel is that's a good thing, should be anyway. And then then you look at like my generation where trauma started to happen at a very young age for some of us, and then we were told, you don't, don't say that. But that's because like our grandparents, when they came back, they didn't speak about their stuff, and then our parents, they could have expanded their consciousness, but then for whatever reason, we were not allowed to, and then so they didn't really talk about the stuff that they were going through from their parents, which could have also been abusive in a sense. And then you're my generation, which is like the black sheep that went through a lot of stuff, and then you're the ones that went through like trauma at a very young age, like self, and then the others that sent overseas to go fight for God knows what. That's not the right way to say that, please forgive me. I just and then they come back, and then we're a mess over here because we're trying to deal with our own trauma, and they come back and they're also wounded, and what happened. They were, pain medication was a big thing. It wrote up like something like, I don't know, like $100 a month, which how that wasn't just, so everybody's just in pain, and we're not speaking about the pain and having honest conversation about like, hey guys, I think we need to heal. That's what it feels like happened. I mean, it is what happened. And then, they went in and then like arrested everybody, and then put a quote unquote treatment centers that also don't have a clue on how to heal, and then it's just more medications of a different kind that just suppress rather than heal. And so that's why I think it's cool that people are finally looking into things like shamanism and bringing in peer specialists that have the life experience that can sit there and talk to these therapists as well, because they're super intelligent because they went to school for that stuff. And it's just different avenues and soul journeys. It's starting to bring those people together. And what do you feel if you felt pulled to go do that? Then that is where your soul is leading you. That is probably your mission as a soul to be here to do that. Then you have those of us that, like mine was apparently, to go through lots and lots of stuff so that I could step in later with the life experience from my perspective and be like, okay, well here's a different perspective, and I think that we are coming to a really interesting place in our species evolution where we have all gone through so much in one form or another, and it's bringing all those pieces together from all over and being like, how can we course correct now? Knowing what we do about healing and that there are other modalities that we may have missed, what can we do to course correct? That's where compassion and forgiveness come in too, because you recognize that we just, as a species, have been sleeping for a very long time. And then you start waking up to things and you're like, oh, well, forgive them for they know not what they do, and they're, and that's like everybody. We're all, and now I feel, because I had to research this, started to go through this whole awakening, I'm like, I gotta figure out what in the world is happening to me, because you still start getting these, I call them energetic downloads, like planets are in alignment. You get this influx of energy that comes into our planet and starts to energetically, give you information. And then you also understand from the perspective of shamanism, where spirit's always trying to work with us. That's what divine testing is about, right? Are you ready to awaken, and what will you do with it once you are? Will you give back to society and help others to awaken and to get through this process as well? I feel like that's what we've been doing here for very, very, very long time. And what a cool place that we're in now, where we can acknowledge that. myself, like, I thought we already did that. We're like, there's always more to go. I mean, the universe is massive, and I'm just out here. And then you start to look up, and you're like, oh, there's more. Well, that's why it's important to look into, like, ancient history, too. And then they all said we came from the stars, and somehow I guess we got sidetracked off of that for, I don't know. Everybody remember who and what we actually happened here. Still the same species, though, you know? I've been really wanting to have these conversations with somebody. I just, you gotta be careful what you say to people, because not everybody wants to hear this stuff. Like, that's not true. I'm like, do you research? Do you look into it? Or do you just, and then I have to, like, forgive me for even saying that, but then again, if somebody's not willing to look into this stuff, they're not gonna see videos like this anyway. And I feel too that's why, like, so many people today are being pulled to record and to kind of just speak about their experiences, because when you start kind of going through the process and waking up to truth, it's difficult to find other people that you can really resonate with, and I feel like that's what a lot of, like, the solitude and stuff that so many of us are facing are. And you start to change when you go through the awakening as well, also, right? Because you're waking up and it doesn't make sense to everybody. I feel like every generation goes through this, I was open-minded and studied and researched a lot, so I feel like mine got very intense very quickly. But I haven't, I'm really into learning about all different kinds of things. I think it's important, for the soul. How do you truly awaken to your soul if you're not stepping outside your comfort zone to learn things that you don't already know, even if it's not your belief system or something that you find like, let's see, whether you believe it to be truth or not, looking into those things, different types of philosophy, spiritual beliefs, different kinds of, even like arts that you're into, like to music, to dance, to all of those things, whether you think you like it or not. How do you know unless you're looking into it and actually trying? So many people think that they know who they are because they have yet to step outside their comfort zone and be like, what else can I learn? And I think that's the beauty too of our whole planet, is the differences. What can I learn from somebody else, and seeing it from that perspective, like what do I not yet know about life? You can think that you know about life when you've only lived it one way, and then I don't know, I can't understand that train of thought, because it doesn't make any. How do you really know who you are? If you're not out there and be like, oh, something different, can you teach me? I think that's the beautiful thing about all the different race, creeds, religions, and cultures, is that what can I learn? How can I grow? Where were we? Conversations with self and soul. Co-starring Spirit. want happy people, you know? A lot's going on up here. So much to consider and to think about and to expand on. Come on, butterfly. Hello. It's at home. It's like a hey. Because, you know, butterflies can't, they don't speak. So it's like source being like, hi. It's a beautiful thing too about like spiritual inheritance. You just have to figure out the way the universe speaks to us, so it's actually really cool. You know? Some people would be like, oh, it's just coincidence, but then, you know, coincidence, the definition is something happens more than once without casual connection, and then when it happens all the time, you're like, oh, it's not coincidence anymore. That's, and then you wake up and you're like, source speaks to us all the time. This has just, can you see the signs and remember? And too, like I want to help people like get to that point where they can see. I mean, people are, you know, it's happening. You hear people talk about signs and synchronicity all the time. At least I do, and I'm looking into stuff like that. So, you know, bread of life and whatnot. How much do you choose to expand and grow? See, confirmation. Source like, yep, do. Sounds bananas till it starts happening. You're like, holy bananas. So it's true. Oh, you know, holy bananas. Go full circle. That's when healing becomes important, right? Healing spirit. Which, you know, healing the psyche, basically. Not suppressing, because that doesn't actually heal anything. It's, oh, hey, Ibis. Good morning, buddy. Thank you, Source. Check. The youngest bird, you know. And then it's like, what do you research? And you sit for wisdom. I feel like me and Toast can like cope with it. this whole like awakening, right, and starting to finally like heal, like I was always told I was sensitive, and so when I get quiet like that, just I'm very sensitive, and not just emotionally, but like I mean that too, yes, but just the energy, and I'm trying to recognize and to understand the way that I feel energy, because it's when I stopped suppressing, I was like, oh, like I'm more sensitive than I thought. And again, not because anybody was, we were just misguided, you know. And instead of, I feel, and I said this in an earlier video, instead of seeing it as mental quote unquote illness, potentially look at it through the lens of, is this evolution? And instead of being, gotta do it like older, and they need, it could be the potential of the human being, essentially, and let's look at it through a new lens, like how can we help instead of suppress and hinder, even for our own benefit, on consciousness, soul, spiritual level. You know, reason and intention for why you do things is super important. Because to me, like, you can also comprehend. How do you address the psyche without addressing the spirit when they go hand in hand with one another? And then they always speak it like they're being like a spiritual W word, and it's like, hello? Not all the time. And then there's like energy and frequency and vibration that's all around all the time, going back to the very beginning of time. And then there's the kind of energy or characteristics or personality traits or spirit that a person can embody, and it's like, who do you choose to be? How much healing do you choose to do for self so that you can calm the psyche, the spirit, and grow as a soul? It's just looking at things from a different perspective. I feel like looking at it from a higher perspective, personal opinion,